Trial Lawyers University, where the Titans come to train. Produced and powered by LawPods.
We got Andrew Pickett all the way from, what city are you from in Florida?
I'm in Melbourne, Florida, right on the East Coast.
Isn't my friend Doug Beam live around there?
Doug Beam is right down the road from me, and we joke and say that we're in rival gangs, but I actually see Doug Beam at conferences more than I do in Melbourne. But yeah, Doug Beam's right down the road.
Oh yeah, we're all going to see him next week in Miami.
That's right.
I think he's the president of the NTL.
Yeah, I think this is the end of his year as president.
There's a lot of obligations, I'm sure. It's going to be like being president of AAJ, I'm sure. A lot of obligations. But that's to say. So, Mr. Pickett, you and I have known each other for what? Quite a few years.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because you came to the first TLU Beach when we did that Rex Paris program in 22, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I was there. That was a good one.
That was a little baby.
Getting better.
Up.
Yeah.
You know, it's grown went from 200 to 400 to 600. Last year we had 820.
Wow.
This year, I think we'll have more than 1,000 people there. And it's going to be, well, now that, of course, I mean, I expect quite a surge when people see, your smiling mug on the, but it's the best. This is like nothing makes me happier that when people who come to my conference as attendees, go and practice their craft and then eventually get to the top as to the speaker column, because that's what if people say it or not say it, everybody, 99% of people want that, right? As we're sitting there, I always think to myself, man, one day I want to be on a stage somewhere. I mean, I do. It's like,
I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to it. I think I'm going to bring a couple of my attorneys from my firm to the TLU.
No, it's going to be,
yeah,
it's going to be so great. But it's like, I remember when I first started on this journey with Dave Clark, who was part of the original Trial Lawyers College and, was mentored by Jerry Spence. But when I started working with him back in 2014, because I'd met him at Jerry Spence's last trial, and we started discussing all the rhetoric and stuff. And then I went to Omaha and started learning from him. I remember he said to me one day, he goes, Dan, one day you're going to have students. I'm like, the fuck would I ever teach anybody? He's like, trust me, one day you will. I'm like, okay, boss, whatever you say. But he's always like, see, I told you, Ambrose, I put you on this track. You owe me your life. I'm like, absolutely, Clark. Owe you everything. I appreciate it so much. But it's a journey, and this becoming life, running a business, becoming who we are and becoming a trial lawyer are all a constant journey of persistent, growth. And you really exemplify that because, you have worked, because I see you at all these conferences and talking to you, we have a few different philosophies on things, which we'll discuss here as far as like the learning is still, everybody finds their place and, finds their, people that want to keep getting better. And that is the key to the game. Really it's not, Trial Lawyers College has their philosophy. Reptile has their philosophy. Some people like Clag, Raleigh, basically probably have, their own general philosophies of, trial by human. I have my philosophy on what I teach here as far as performance and connection. And it's, and everybody's going to connect with different philosophies a little differently. And the idea is, if you keep searching, you'll find your philosophy you connect with. So,
sure.
Mr. Pickett, tell us, how did you find your way to becoming a, lawyer/trial lawyer?
Well, unlike a lot of people, it wasn't something that I always wanted to do, but it was something in the back of my mind. So I grew up in Florida, went away for college at University of Virginia. And when I was studying there, that was the first time that I was away from home for any significant period of time. And I have a twin brother, and my twin brother went to University of Florida for undergrad. So I wanted to do something different and kind of forge my own identity. And when I was away from home for the first time, I started really thinking about what is my own philosophy on life? What is it that I believe versus what was taught to me growing up? And so that was a really big part of my own inward journey. And I decided in line with that to major in philosophy because I wanted to figure out my own philosophy on life. So I figured that studying philosophy would allow me to organize my thinking in a really structured way. And that ended up being a really good major for me. So I majored in philosophy. There was a point in time where I thought that I might want to teach philosophy, be a professor, which required going on to get a PhD in philosophy. But towards the end of my time at University of Virginia, which is where I went, I realized that being a philosophy professor is pretty narrow, and getting a PhD in philosophy means that you can pretty much only teach. So I wanted to find something that gave me kind of broader career options. So I had a year off in between undergrad and law school, studied for the LSAT, applied to law school, and wanted to come back to Florida. So I applied at University of Florida, and my twin brother at the time was finishing up there. I joke and say that his third senior year at UF was my first year in law school. So we were able to be roommates that year. Went through the program at UF. I ended up taking a lot of classes at UF Law School based on the professors that I liked. And it just worked out that a lot of the professors that I liked taught tax law and estate planning. And I was really fascinated by that on the academic setting. So I thought that I wanted to do that. And after law school, I ended up going down to University of Miami and got an LL.M in estate planning, thinking that I wanted to be an estate planning attorney. I worked in that field for about 2 months, and it just was not what I thought it was gonna be. It wasn't as interesting in practice as it was academically, and I just found myself unfulfilled. So, right around that time, I was living down in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. I came across somebody who became a mentor, and he was a federal prosecutor. His name is Roger Powell, and he encouraged me to think about being a trial lawyer, and he asked if I'd ever thought about it, and I told him no, I never did trial team or interned with any firms that did trial work, but he asked me to watch one of his federal jury trials. So I watched this federal trial that he did down in Miami and just immediately got the bug. I think seeing the performance aspect, seeing the competitive aspect, I saw myself being somebody in the courtroom that could do that. And I really saw myself in that position. So at his encouragement, I began kind of shifting my focus and applied at the state attorney's office down in Miami-Dade and in Brevard County. And then my parents were still living in the Melbourne area, which is kind of near Cocoa Beach or Cape Canaveral, if you're familiar with that. So I came home one weekend and I applied to the state attorney's office to be a prosecutor here in the Melbourne area and got an interview the next day and got a job on the spot. So that was kind of the circuitous path that led me to being a trial lawyer. And, I worked as a prosecutor for about 4 years, got to try a lot of cases there. I think I had 42 jury trials in 4 years and had a lot of good advice from people there, which was try as many cases as you can. And I'm glad that I took that advice. And during my first year there, I had the opportunity to sit second chair on a first degree murder case, which was really a unique opportunity as a first year prosecutor. And so that really kind of solidified my interest. But as I spent more time there, I started to identify, the people who had been there for a really long time. And I think it's kind of the same way in criminal defense. I know that that's your background, is that people who are in that field for a really long time, I think, can get really jaded, and especially prosecutors. And so I would look at these people who had been there for 30 years and think to myself, do I really want to be like that in 30 years and be, have the cynicism and like a dim view of humanity? And so I think I got out at the right time.
And no money.
Oh yeah.
Don't forget that.
Well, that is true as well. But I think that
Not that it's all about money, but you know what? It helps. I'm, you ain't, people say, you ain't wrong when you say money helps. It's not everything, but it helps.
Absolutely. And feeling like the time that you're putting in is being well rewarded. So, a lot of prosecutors will go and do criminal defense, and I somewhat considered that. But even at the time, it was really important for me to have a mentor. And that's been kind of a big part of my journey, is finding mentors and coaches and like you said, constantly learning. So during the time that I was a prosecutor, I would ask the judges, who were the best trial attorneys around? And they would tell me, and then I would go watch their trials. And fortunately, I had a supervisor who would allow me to just on the job go watch trials. So I watched some of the civil trials, and there was a particular firm that I watched in trial a few times that I was impressed with. And So when I started looking, it just turned out that while I was looking, they were looking to hire. And so I ended up getting a job with a personal injury firm that had been around for a while and worked there for about 4 years, got to try a bunch of civil cases and learned a lot
What's the
about
name of the firm?
the firm is Alpazar Law. They're in Palm Bay, about 15 minutes south of me. So had a good mentor there. Worked there for about 4 years. Got to try a lot of cases on the personal injury side and really learn the craft of personal injury and really kind of fall in love with the contingency work, which is what I've continued to do. And then after about 4 years, I decided to start my own law firm. And I'm practicing law in the area where I grew up, and so what I identified during my time working at another firm was just my ability to bring in business. And I knew that I could continue to do that if I started my own. And so it was right around 2018 that I started my firm. And that just happened to coincide with the time in my life when my dad passed away, which was a really important and impactful time for me because we were very close and he lived in this area. And so one of my reasons, my why for starting my firm was to kind of carry out his legacy. It turned out that his last job before he was like basically medically retired was he would advise small business startups on their business plans. And so as I was thinking about starting my own firm, I had an opportunity to speak with him about it and got some really good encouragement. And then when I started, it was about exactly a month after he died that I started my firm. And when I picked the my like logo and my colors for the firm, it was kind of a nod to him because he also went to University of Virginia. And so the orange and the blue that I have in my logo is kind of a tribute to him. And so that was kind of my starting point, and that was 8 years ago. And since then, I've continued to focus on plaintiff's personal injury and kind of grow as a trial lawyer simultaneously with trying to grow as a business owner. So that's kind of the long story about how I got here.
The long arc. Well,
That's right.
back in college, though, I know you were a swimmer. And so I know because there's certain, as I have had the opportunity to sit on my ass and talk to the greatest trial lawyers in the country, quite a few of them were highly competitive college athletes like Brian Panish,
Yeah.
Ben Rabinowitz, Chris Hammonds. I don't know if he's out of Oklahoma, but he was a national champion on the Oklahoma Sooners 2001 team. And so, but that kind of level of performing, especially in front of people
Yeah.
and the discipline to train to get there, I think really, because people think, I always ask me, like, oh, they're natural born trial lawyers. And there are no natural born trial lawyers. None of this it's no such thing as talent in this game. It's a matter of consistent, disciplined action of whatever action you choose that you think is going to benefit you the most. And some you don't choose because you think it's going to benefit you as a trial lawyer. You just do it at the time. But in hindsight, and I think being a competitive athlete, especially at a collegiate level, is one of those things. So, how did being on the swim team and all that it took really inform your journey to becoming a trial lawyer?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I knew about Brian Panish being an athlete. Sean Claggett was a baseball player in college too. It's just cool to see that kind of that thread that runs through. But for me, like swimming was, swimming is an individual sport, and it's also, as we were talking about before we got on air, it's a very isolating sport. So, your swimming requirements for practicing and training is like 4 to 5 hours a day. And most of that is just like staring at a black line the whole time. And so I think that the individual nature of it was really appealing to me because, you know, it's all up to you. If you do well, then you contribute to that. But if you don't, it's your fault. And the stopwatch or the clock doesn't lie. So I think I really liked that. I think I learned during swimming how to set goals, which has been really important to me in my life. But I think probably most importantly, I learned discipline and time management. And when you're having to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and jump in a cold pool, that's just teaching you grit. I mean, because you don't wanna do it. Every day, you don't wanna do it. You just have to learn how to command your body to do things that your mind doesn't wanna do. And when you do that over a long period of time, you develop a lot of grit, which I think is important as a trial lawyer. So I think that that's probably the biggest impact that it has had for me is learning the discipline and the time management because when you're swimming, especially with a full-time class load, your swimming commitment is 25 to 30 hours a week plus staying on top of all your classes. So you really have to figure out at the beginning of each week how you're going to spend every minute of every week and really be disciplined with your time. So those are a couple of the things that it taught me, but also just like we talked about before, the performance aspect and how you're training really hard to be able to peak at a competition, which is kind of the same as being a trial lawyer. When you have a case that you're working on for a long time and you want to be able to peak when you're performing and having the confidence that the preparation that you put in is going to lead to the great result at the trial or at the swim meet. So those are some of the takeaways for me. And I think another one would be it helped me appreciate the benefit of coaches, which has been a really big impact in my life. I had a really influential coach in high school, a guy named Terry Schlickenmeyer, and then my college coach, Mark Bernardino, was also really influential for me. So having those coaches who can demand the best of you and who see more in you than you see in yourself and helping develop that self-confidence has been really big for me and something that I've tried to carry over into my work as a trial lawyer and finding mentors and coaches, but also trying to be that mentor and coach for other attorneys at my firm, other lawyers in the community. So, yeah, a lot of ways that swimming has impacted my growth.
You said you started your own firm about 8 years ago,
Yeah.
and what did you say is the biggest challenge of starting your own firm?
Well, I think that in the early phases, my focus was, 100%, well, close to 100% on kind of the development of trial skills. And although that continues to be important to me, the development of business skills is equally important. And so I think a big challenge as a trial lawyer starting your own firm is learning how to delegate and being comfortable allowing other people to do things that you think that you're the best at. And so, especially over the last 3 years, I've really started to delegate. We're going to be up to 16 employees, 4 attorneys. And so, what that will enable me to do, and what I see in some of the best trial lawyers, is that if you have really good attorneys working with you that you can rely on to work up cases and really dig into them and be able to handle depositions and really assist as second chair or even third chair getting ready for a trial, I think that's huge because as a prosecutor and as an associate at my other firm, I was used to just having to do everything. And so shedding myself of that mindset and learning how to delegate was probably my biggest challenge. But once I made that mindset shift, I've really seen a lot of things open up.
And you're constantly, working. Obviously, that's something that people have trouble oftentimes is like understanding that, you're a profession, but we're working a business here too. And
Yeah.
like when I was a young lawyer, I had my own firm, but I didn't know how to run a business or make money. And I fucking killed myself, literally killed myself working my 60, 70 hours a week to make $50,000 a year,
Right.
stressed to like no end and like feeling like I'm the only one that cared and about, and the only one worried about the money. And it's just like, I
Yeah.
realized that I either I can't have people work for me or I got to really develop my leadership skills
Right.
because it wasn't really working out. And that's really a difficult thing to do, especially when you're trying to learn the skills of being a lawyer, which is, very time consuming. That and then trying to run a business. Ooh, there's a lot to do. And that's why most people never do it because it is overwhelming.
Yeah, it is. But one thing that I've learned and has been a really big insight for me over the past few years is that being an entrepreneur and a business owner is really kind of a mirror into my own personal development because what I see in my own the things that I need to work on personally, how to be a better husband, how to be a better father, my approaches to handling conflict, my communication, all of those things that are applicable in my personal life are very evident in my business life as well. And so the same things that I need to work on personally, I also need to work on professionally and growth in the personal area flows over into the business area. And so I think whether we like it or not, being business owners kind of forces us to develop those skills and those aspects of self-awareness that allow us to be a better person, but also a better business owner.
Yep. It's a constant, that's what makes it fun,
Yeah.
the constant growth. And I want to talk to you about your journey of learning the skills and the, well, skills, strategy, knowledge that you have to become to get to where you're at. Because, I mean, recently you got a couple really nice verdicts, and we're going to talk about those. Actually, let's talk about those, and then so because you had two, because I keep track of these things. I get to see who's doing stuff here. So you've had two verdicts recently that were pretty significant. So tell me about those.
Sure. So, back in January of 2024, I had a verdict for $6.7 million on a car wreck case involving a client of mine who had herniated discs in his spine. And it was really significant because it was a uninsured motorist case against State Farm where the policy limits were only $100,000. And they just, in our view, could have and should have settled that for the policy limits during the opportunity that they were given, and they didn't. And so as a result, my client had to go through years of litigation, and we became really close over that period of time. And he was just a great client. He was an engineer in his late 30s, wonderful family, and we just really worked up the case and brought it to trial. And it was one of those trials where just everything worked out. And this was actually my only trial where the jury gave every penny of what we asked for, which, usually in the plaintiff's world, they give you less than what you ask for because they assume that, you're asking for more than you're expecting. So that was a really cool trial. I did a lot of things to prepare. I mean, I can tell you as much as you want to hear about that, but that was January 2024, and we just got and obviously State Farm appealed it, but we just got the appellate court's ruling that they were affirming the verdict, and that was just a month or so ago. And now we're on to the next phase, which is the bad faith case, to try to collect the full verdict amount above the policy limits.
So that what you said, that was an auto case,
Yeah.
and it was obviously bad faith with an open policy. And so what did you do in that trial that, you think, in whatever phases of it you think really contributed to the result?
Well, I think that so much of it was what was the time and energy that I put into the preparation. So in this case, and all of my cases that I know are going to trial, I will do a significant amount of witness preparation, particularly with my client. So in this case, I hired a psychodramatist. You may know him, Mike Trainer, and he came down and he worked with us. He's somebody that I met through the Trial Lawyers College. We spent an entire day kind of discovering the story of my client's journey. And I find that those sessions really help me in connecting with my client and helping my client kind of open up and be able to give some really vivid imagery and kind of act out the stories that they've been through in their lives and throughout their journey. So that was a really big part of it, was the time that I put into client preparation. Another aspect that I think contributed to it a lot was the preparation for the defense experts. So in this case, the judge allowed the defense, over our objection, to have two separate compulsory medical examination doctors. So one doctor they hired was a general orthopedist, and then the other one was a neurosurgeon. So with the general orthopedist, I took his deposition, and a lot of lawyers in Florida do not take depositions of compulsory medical examination doctors because we have law that holds them to only stay within the four corners of their report. So the theory is that if you don't depose them, then you don't give them an opportunity to deviate from the report. But I think that sometimes it can be really beneficial to depose them, and it certainly was in this case. So with this doctor, I took his deposition, and during the deposition, he had a big paper file. And I spent the first, 20 minutes or so of the deposition going through the file. And what I discovered in the file was that he had a report, a compulsory medical examination report, that was a draft of the report that was written 2 days before the exam took place. And that draft report already had his conclusion that my client was not injured. So we identified that as an exhibit, and he admitted that he wrote the report concluding that my client wasn't injured before he even saw my client. And so that was just one of these things that you stumble upon, and if you take a deposition, it can really help. So there was kind of a watershed moment in the trial where I was cross-examining him, and I got him to admit that he authored this report and came to his conclusions before he saw my client. And we ended up having a juror on the case who was our most conservative juror. But I noticed that when the doctor admitted that he authored the report before the exam, like her eyebrows raised and she perked up. And I think that was kind of a turning point in the trial. So, in addition to the client preparation, the preparation of the defense experts was, I think, really helpful. So, that was the orthopedic doctor. They also had a neurosurgeon named Dr. Larry Fishman, and he now does all CME work. And what I discovered ahead of time was that he traveled, he had testified in like, I want to say like 27 different counties in the state of Florida. And so I had a list of all of the counties that he traveled in, and I got on examination, I got him to admit to all of those. And then I had a demonstrative aid made that was the state of Florida, and all of the counties that he testified in, I color coded red, and the ones that he didn't were in white. And this was a case against State Farm, so their logo was red and white. And I thought that was a really powerful demonstrative. And I ended up calling him a traveling neurosurgeon. And the defense objected in the closing argument. And the judge said, well, he did say that he traveled and he said that he was a neurosurgeon. So I'm going to overrule the objection. And so there were just a couple of things with those doctors that really, I think, helped us in the trial. And then, another thing that I did in that trial and that I've kind of tried to evolve is like a really heavy emphasis on demonstrative aids. So we had animations done of the surgery that he had, which was a spinal cord stimulator implant, and also radio frequency ablations. And I think anytime that I can do an animation or an illustration, I try to, because I think that the jurors really can understand the procedures better than the doctor just, explaining it verbally. So those were some of the things that went well. And I think that, sometimes in these cases, the way that they're defended can backfire if the defense takes too much of an extreme position. And so we saw some of that in the trial, which I think contributed to the verdict as well. So yeah, a lot to say about that trial, but it's one that I'm really proud of, and that I had a very deserving client.
We're going to do a case analysis on that
Yep. Yep.
that trial. What date is that? We have that scheduled for?
Yeah, so we're gonna do one on February 26th, 1:30 to 4:30 Eastern, and we'll start out with that trial. And then we're gonna do another one on my most recent wrongful death trial, and that'll be on May 7th from 1:30 to 4:30. So the February 26th case analysis will be on this is a $6.7 million herniated disc trial arises from a car crash. And then the May 7th is a $9 million wrongful death case.
So let's talk about that case. What happened there?
So that was one that I tried in November, and that was one that was referred to me by actually one of my best friends from law school. And I got involved a bit after the initial stages, but this was a wrongful death of a gentleman who was in his early 30s, who was on his way back from work, and he got killed by a drunk driver. Really a very sad case. Another case where there was a limited insurance policy, but our argument is that they insurance company acted in bad faith by not investigating and not tendering the policy limits in a timely manner. They just kind of dragged their feet on it and took way too long, and that resulted in the plaintiff bringing the lawsuit. So I was at only 100,000, and it took them almost 3 months to pay. Where there was another insurance company involved who was the uninsured motorist carrier who paid within like 12 days, I think. So that was another one that's predicated on a theory of bad faith. And I do find that those are the cases that go to trial, at least for me the most, where I get called in, usually by another attorney, after the insurance company has not settled when it could have and should have, which happened in both of those cases. So in that case, I represented the the surviving parents. So under Florida law, the parents were the survivors under the wrongful death statute, and we worked up the case. It was we had a claim for punitive damages. In Florida, we have kind of an unfavorable jury instruction on punitive damages. From what I've heard from Sean Claggett in this is that in Nevada, the jury instruction actually says that the purpose of punitive damages is to destroy the defendant. In Florida, it says they cannot award an amount that would financially destroy the defendant. But we had that claim anyway, and it was a pretty quick trial. It was a 3-day trial in the compensatory phase where we picked a jury in day one, and then we presented most of our testimony on day two, one witness on day three, and then we closed on, sorry, most of our testimony on day two, and then we closed on day three. And so it kind of lent itself to this like kind of speed trial that Joe Freed talks about. And it's something that I've been experimenting with and I think worked well in this case, especially with the jurors' attention spans. So we did the same thing as far as preparation. We, hired a psychodramatist. And this was interesting because the mother and father survivors had divorced when the decedent was very young. And then they both got remarried, but they were on good terms. So when we did the psychodrama with them, we had both of them together, and it was a really cool experience. And they both commented at the end of it that they felt like that experience actually brought them closer. So I think that was really helpful. I did a lot of different type of stuff on that case. I did the big data study with John Campbell. I actually did some consulting with Jordan Logan and Sean Claggett on that case. They helped a lot with the demonstratives. We had Focus Graphics do some really cool animations on that. And we actually did in-person focus groups on that case as well. So one of my attorneys, Tiffany Whitehouse, led 4 days of focus groups the week before trial, where I rehearsed my jury selection and my opening statement. And we got a lot of really good feedback during those focus groups that I was able to integrate into trial. So those were some of the things we did on that case. That case is, we still have motions pending in that case. They're, as always, trying to move for a new trial. We feel pretty good about our odds there, but the bad faith case is going to be the big battle on that one. So I'll be talking in more detail about that during the case analysis webinar that we do on May 7th. But that was a really great trial for us.
The live focus groups you did,
Yeah.
it seems like they were more like the week before trial, were more like
Yeah.
dress rehearsals for
Yes.
trial, where you're practicing your voir dire, practicing your opening. Did you do any practice cross-examinations of experts or have your client testify in front of your focus groups during that time?
No, those focus groups were just like you said, the dress rehearsals. And if we would have done it at the beginning, we might have done some theming with focus groups, but this was something that we did just in the last week. So really all that we did was kind of a dress rehearsal where I was literally, wearing the same suit I was going to be wearing in trial. I got some really interesting feedback from the focus groups. So I usually wear an Apple Watch, and I was wearing this, and the jury was the focus group jury was telling me afterwards that was really distracting. So that was really interesting. And so I didn't wear the watch during the trial. Another really interesting aspect is during my opening presentation, I had a PowerPoint slide where it showed the distance from where the accident happened, where my client was killed, to where his home was, which is like 2.5 blocks. And it was really powerful demonstrative. And during each time that we did the dress rehearsal with the focus group, there was like an audible gasp at that slide. And so what the focus group feedback allowed me to do was to pause during that time. And, as you know, with your presentation stuff that you do, the pausing can be really effective. And what was interesting is that my 9-year-old son, Reef, is doing theater now. He's actually getting ready to star as the genie in the Aladdin play. And one of the things that they do with their rehearsals for theater is they try to gauge when the audience is going to applause, and so that they're not saying their lines during that applause. And so I thought that that was a really kind of a neat parallel with doing an opening statement or a closing argument and getting a sense of where the appropriate pauses are based on the reaction of the audience. So that was a really great insight that I got from the focus groups.
The It's like I think the dress rehearsal stuff is so important. Like I went down and saw Satch Oliver do his dress rehearsal in front of before a recent trial. It's just getting there and delivering the voir dire and the patterns of the voir dire, so you get the comfortable. You just get in the flow with the conversation,
Yep.
and even your opening, what chunks you're going to deliver to different jurors, and
Yep.
spreading it around, and the use of your visuals is just because I heard a saying that the greatest improvement is between the first rep and the second rep is the most. And so people that their first time actually doing their whole opening is in front of the jury just boggles my mind. I
Right.
mean, literally, somebody maybe Panish and Raleigh can get away with it and, not noticeably affect the results. It may affect the results, but if it's 30 million or 40 million, the rest of humanity's not really noticing.
Well,
So
well, well, I think that most lawyers do not do any rehearsal, and I think that it comes from this belief that if you rehearse it, it's going to come across as too scripted or not spontaneous or authentic. But I just don't find that to be the case, and I think that's kind of a cop out and a reason that people use as a justification not to practice. So I think that the practice, if you have the time, is really
if you have the
important.
time, how can you not have the time? That's like you're giving the people the cop. I mean, everybody has the time. You have to do the work. You have to do the work. Let's I want to talk to you about what you're going to be teaching at Huntington Beach because you've been to TLU Beach, I think, what, 3 times?
Yeah, 3 times.
You were there for the first one back in 2022, and then you were there last year in 2025, and you were there in either 2023 or 2024.
I think it was 2023 that I was there. So yeah,
Yeah, and then when you missed in 2024, what happened?
I think I
You got a
must have
phone call. I said, Pickett,
had.
where the fuck are you? We're having the greatest conference in the world, and you're not here, and we count on you to show up.
Yeah,
Would you have a
I must have had
trial or
secret
something?
probably some
Either the
work
baby
obligation.
was born or a trial. Other than that, you better be at TLU Beach. Other be you're a moron.
I will be there. And so so there'll be two kind of elements of what I'm doing. One is gonna be a lecture, and in that lecture, I'm gonna really deconstruct this, $6.7 million case. I think that a lot of people who go to that conference practice primarily in the, area of, you know, car accident, car wreck litigation. And so this is just kind of a very classic car wreck case that I think will lend itself to deconstruction in a way that I think I can share a lot that will help benefit other people. And I think one of the points that I want to make during my lecture is that there's so much that I've learned from other people that I've integrated and made my own. And I want to be able to share that in a way that kind of honors the people who shared it for me, because I think that, part of what you're doing with this TLU and what other organizations do is really try to share knowledge so that we can lift all of the boats with the rising tide. So I'm really excited to share the insights from that trial during the lecture. And then I'm also doing a workshop, which is going to just kind of focus on framing the basic auto case from A to Z, really the nuts and bolts of the beginning to the end, and try to pack as much as I can in the 3 hour window, and bring a bunch of materials to share and kind of allow other people to see at least what has worked for me, which will hopefully be of some benefit to the people who attend.
Join us March 6th and 7th in Hermosa Beach, California for our witness prep and direct examination workshop. You will learn how to transport your plaintiff and before and after witnesses back in time so they not only remember the story, but they relive it so that the jury not only hears it, but they experience it. Because a jury can't provide money for pain they don't feel. This program is limited to 10 participants, so register today. Right, when you help them with their own auto cases and, framing the structures of those. And I think that's pretty exciting because, I'm moving back to California here in just a few weeks to LA where I have a bar card, unlike Nevada where I don't. And I am quite excited to get back to the courtroom because it's been a while for me, a lot of studying, but it's a little easier to get to court when you're around people that are going to court all the time and you actually have the ability to go to court. So, you know, only had a couple friends in Las Vegas, and because, you know, I was never there. I'm on the road 2 or 3 weeks a month, so it's kind of hard to develop a network where if you don't, live in, and like California is so much better. Like, ooh, I can't believe, but it was good to be in isolation there up in my condo there for 4 years. I got to really people like it was good. I'm like it was good for business because I got to do nothing but work around the clock, no distractions, no friends wanting to hang out, nobody to do anything, and so it was a good time. But I'm ready for because I'm in LA right now. And it's just so nice, seeing your friends and hanging out. So looking forward to doing that. I want to ask you about your journey now on learning because I spent 12. I know this trial lawyers college was a significant impact on how you do things, and I find it fascinating. Because I spent 12 years every year going to the ranch, and so I have a I feel I have a solid working knowledge of their philosophy there. And so let me ask you, as far as different aspects on trial, so witness preparation, which is, I think, one of the most important skills that people really suck at and don't do well. And, I've seen different methodologies. And, I know you brought the psychodramatist in, but let's say, how would you define the witness prep methodology that you learned from the ranch?
Yeah, so happy to share. Yeah, and like you said, my experience at the trial lawyers college was really impactful for me, and it kind of dates back to when I first became a plaintiff's lawyer, which was in 2013. I had a friend who went through the ranch, I think in 2012, and he told me all about like what was going on, and having to stand up on the picnic table and sing, and you know and write your own poem, and that was actually really fascinating to me. So when I was working for a firm as an associate, I tried to get them to support me applying and going there, but they never wanted me to be out of the office for 3 weeks. So it just never worked. And so when I started my own firm, that was one of my first priorities, is trying to figure out how to go there. And so, like I said, it was right around the time that my dad died, and I went to a regional in April, I think, of 2018. And the first psychodrama that I ever did, I was the protagonist, and it was with, you might remember Louise Littman. She was there, and she just led me through it, and we did a really intense and powerful psychodrama where I was like talking to my deceased father and like introducing him to my future children. It was really, really impactful. And so I ended up going in September of 2018 is when I went. And I think there were a lot of aspects that I took away from it, but as far as the witness prep, I think if I were to distill like some of the philosophy around witness prep from the trial lawyers college, is that I think one of the key tenets is that we really want to respect the humanity of the people on the jury. I hear a lot of trial lawyers who will talk negatively about jurors, but I think that one of the biggest things that we need to embody as a mindset is that we really need to respect and honor jurors, and that our obligation, as Joshua Carton says, is to protect the jury. And so in order to protect the jury, we need to be able to connect with them. But there are steps to that. So I think on the witness preparation, what we need to understand is that if the end goal is for our client to connect with the jury, then we need to connect with our client. But, as Jerry Spence says, it all begins with you. So in order to connect with the client, you first need to connect with yourself and have self-awareness and understand your own stories and your own struggles. And when you do work on yourself and have that self-awareness, you can see what the commonalities are between you and the client. So I think that the time that you spend with the client and reversing roles with them and understand the world through their eyes, particularly with the use of psychodrama, can really help you to understand them, which also builds trust between you and the client, which I think later becomes evident to the jury. So you work on yourself, you connect then with the client and you really get to know them. You spend time at their house, you get to know their family. And I think that bonding really helps once you get to trial. And so as far as the investment in getting to know them, that really helps to be able to pick and choose what stories you're going to tell and what you're going to act out at the trial. So I think about witness preparation as like kind of a director of a movie who is like editing down a lot of footage. And when you edit down that footage, you want to make it, you want to pick the most impactful stories to be able to bring to life to the jury. So once you have the bonding connection with the client where they trust you, basically all you're doing during trial is having a conversation with the client and including the jury as part of that conversation. So if you've already built the tribe in your jury selection and you have built that trust, it's almost as if it's kind of a triangle between you and the client and the jury, and then the defense is just sitting over in the corner. So you're telling the client's story. The jury is able to see that you know the client, and sometimes it'll even be evident to the jury that I've been to the client's house based on what we're describing. And so the jury will see that bond, and then what we're trying to do is get the jury to understand and relate to the client story because we all share the same stories. We all have dealt with heartache, with struggle, with loss, with love and triumph. And so trying to tap into those kind of universal themes so that the jury connects with the client and then the jury can see the connection that you have with the client and then the jury can connect with you kind of by by design. I think that's really where it all comes together. So that would be kind of my philosophy or my take on the trial lawyers college philosophy of witness preparation. And what's been interesting is that I've had some trials where I've been able to talk to the jury afterwards. And one memorable trial that I had, which is actually right after I went to trial lawyers college, this was in May of 2019. I got a $2.5 million verdict, ironically also against State Farm. And what the jury told me afterwards was, we really appreciated how much you loved your client, and we could see that throughout the case. Whereas kind of the approach that the defense attorney had was a lot more like kind of cold and impersonal. So I think that was a real testament that this process works, at least for me. So
Yeah, we'll qualify it, at least for you,
yeah,
because
yeah.
like I spent 12 years there, and you know, I was often very frustrated because I couldn't, the application of whatever quote, quote method was because, but in that process, I mean, that's, but through frustration, you know, pushes. I mean, if I wasn't frustrated with the trial lawyers college, I would have never started Trojan Horse back in, 2014. Because when I was with Jacob Norman in Wyoming and we were supposed to go to like I think it was like 20-year reunion or something. And Jacob, right? He runs Trial by Human with Nick Rowley
Yeah.
and Trial Lawyers for Justice. And we're up on top of this mountain and I'm, complaining to him about some of the stuff that's causing me frustration because I had just spent a few days at the ranch. And he's like, you know what? He's like, if you think you're so smart, you should start your own program. And then that way you can be the dictator of the philosophy. And if people like it, well, you'll have something. If not, then you know that you're just a complainer and, you can shut the fuck up and, either do something or shut the fuck up. And so that was like the beginning of that. And that process really got started because I was talking to Joe Freed at like one of these 360 advocacy courses that was in Vegas. And I was like, I want to become a plaintiff's lawyer because I'd just gone to Cala,
Hmm.
out here in Los Angeles with Nick Rowley and saw him speak and, all these people obviously doing quite well that were plaintiff's lawyers. I'm like, I want some of this for myself. And, and Joe's like, well, what can you, he's like, you got to figure out something you could teach that, that they don't know. And I'm like, oh, about, I've always put my clients on the stand as a criminal defense lawyer, which is pretty unusual. And they always do great and they win and we win because the jury's not going to convict them if they like them and they trust them. And so I described my methodology and Joe's like, that's like psychodrama in a chair. I'm like, so attempting to insult me like I was doing nothing. I was just repeating somebody else's stuff because, Joe was obviously my instructor at the ranch for many, many years and, become very close to him because I'd been there for already 12 years at that point. But so like my philosophy is, because I think that great witness prep is really is really about getting the witness to focus, because everybody that we represent, that you represent, is somewhat catastrophically injured. And, the reality is, not to be, unkind, but the more catastrophically injured, for our purposes of value, the better, right? I mean, not to be sadistic about it.
Right.
Somebody calls you up and says, I got a FedEx rollover. You're like, what happened? Like, oh, everybody walked away. I was just calling to get the money for my car. You're like,
Right.
oh, you're inside. You're like, oh, great. I'm so happy to hear it. Right. I'm glad you called me with your property damage claim. Anyways, but because the people that have been traumatized, as we know, they repress it, right? I mean, they're depressed and they all consumed by it until they can bury it deep enough in their unconscious mind that they don't think about it, and now they're happy again. And here comes the trial lawyer 2 years later saying, hey, Andrew, remember that trauma you suffered? You know how you lost your leg and it was the worst day of your life, and you're all happy now? Well, guess what? We got to talk about that. And now that we got to talk about it, I need you to really relive the event so that the defense lawyer can understand what it is you went through. Because, I truly believe the only purpose of, the goal of putting your client up for a deposition is to convince the defense lawyer, to convince the adjuster to pay your policy limits. And then that way, you're done. I mean, unless you're angling for a bad faith case, then you can botch a deposition, have your client say all this crazy shit, they'll never get settled, right? I mean, if they think your client's full of shit. But that's not the goal. The goal is to have your client be great in deposition so that they're confident for trial. And, they are not worried about being embarrassed in trial, because that's always a fear for human beings, is getting shellacked. And that's why the defense lawyers often try to humiliate, shellac our clients in deposition. So that way they get them fear for trial and they can sell it for less money. And because of this, ability to repress, our job is to go in and basically rip the Band-Aid off and, allow that person to feel the pain again so that we can get the money. I mean, not to be sadistic, but that's what it's about. But that takes a lot of work and a lot of trust. And so I, kind of analogize it is to going into like a very dark room, a dark place, and we could talk about it in that dark place, but then we can come out of there and be back and be happy again. Because I think people are very fearful. If anybody's, has ever suffered from depression, and I have, it's the fucking ugliest, worst, like devastating, immobilizing, place to be. And if you've been there, you never want to go back. Like, and you can't relate to somebody, who's been there unless you've been there, because none of it makes sense. None of it's logical. But it is real. And so, when I prep, because I used to, travel around the country and prep other people's witnesses before the pandemic, because it was, I was consulting. I did a lot of work in Florida, like with Steve Wottrell and Jamie Holland and folks like that on their cases. And so to me, it was always about focusing the mind and getting people to know what it's like to transport, because, you can't, I think the goal of a direct, I agree with you. It's like you're directing a movie.
Right.
And that way in the preparation process, you need all the footage. You need to know the whole story. So that when you got the whole story, now you can craft the pieces that the jury needs to see and cut out 80 or 90% of it. So it gets to the, what I call the minimum effective dose, to get to the feeling as fast as possible, as, with Joe Fried philosophy on speed trial.
Yeah.
And to do that, I developed this process that I teach at all my boot camps now, and it's easy to follow, because it's about, like, if you were the witness, Andrew, and and I was brought in to prep you, or I was co-counseling the case, I'd be like, so Andrew, my job is to help you become the best witness that you can be. Okay, so now we set the intention, like, oh, good, right? And I said to do that, and then I pretend to have like a brain fart. I'm like, Andrew, you ever somebody tell you a story before, and they're all excited? You're kind of like, huh? They go, well, I guess you had to be there. Have you had that happen before?
Sure.
Right. And so what that person is saying is that they weren't able to communicate the excitement or the emotion of the event. Whereas we've all had people start telling a story. As soon as they start telling a story, their facial expressions change to match the facial expression of the people in the story. Their hands start moving in perfect timing with the action of the story. And sometimes their voices even change to mimic or imitate the voices of the people in the story. And they seem to disappear for 2 or 3 minutes. And when they come back, sometimes they're exhausted, and we're exhausted too. because they went there and we went there with them. People tell stories like that, Andrew?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. Obviously, we all tell stories like that from our unconscious mind when we don't give a shit. We're just telling a story to our friend, right? But as soon as somebody says, "Tell me a story," it's like, "Uh-oh, freeze, start thinking, conscious mind, boring narrative." And so, everybody can relate to that setup, right? I said that, and I tell them that's how we're going to help you tell the story of what happened to you and how it affected your life. Because if the jury witnessed the crash and they were there with you in the hospital and they were there with you in your house and they were there with you at night when you couldn't sleep and they were there with you when you struggled to get out of bed, I said, is any doubt in their mind that they would find for you and properly compensate you? And of course, the person's like, no, of course not. I'm like, good. I said, well, that's our job is to make the jury witnesses so we can get justice. Okay. So now we have our intentionality set out. And then, with every person, before I get into like I do this thing called the room exercise. And so I say, now, Andrew, I want you to take a good look around the room and I'll be always modeling for you. And then you'll do the same. And I say, I want you to close your eyes and show us where everything's at now. Right. So you'd be like, oh, there's a monitor over here and there's a window over there and there's a door over here. And then I'll do the same thing as you, but from the opposite. Right. And so I'll see, like, Andrew, you know how that door was it was to my left, but it's to your right. And the window is to my right, but to your left. And, the monitor is behind you. It's in front of me. Well, nothing in this room has changed positions. Just you and I have a different perspective on this room. And every story has a perspective. So we need your perspective. The defendant has a perspective. The officer who showed up has his perspective. But we need your perspective. And I always do that because by the time they get to a deposition, they've learned so much about their case. And I'm always concerned about, them testifying to things that they just read or learned from somebody else.
Right.
And instead of what they actually experienced. And so that's kind of like my setup for it. And then along the same lines, I said, now, Andrew, when we're doing this, it's sort of like we're making a movie. And you're going to be the star of the movie, and I'm the director of the movie. And the star must listen to the director. Because only one person can star and direct their own movie and win the Academy Award. And who is that person?
I don't know.
Clint Eastwood. And you're not Clint Eastwood, and I'm not Clint Eastwood. So you're going to be the star, and I'm going to be the director, okay? And so now it's like, okay. And I said, because that way a person's like, I'm going to be a star. I want to be a star. Everybody wants to be a star of their own movie, right? And I said, I said, you ever see the show Star Trek before? You seen the show Star Trek, Andrew?
Yeah.
You know that guy, Scotty, he pushes a button, and the person disappears in one place, and they reappear in another place in time, and he transports them. Well, that's how we're going to teach you to do it. We're going to teach you how to transport yourself back in time and space and answer the questions that you're asked from back there. And so that way I kind of set up the metaphor in their minds and the setup. And I always tell them, I always record the first 2 times we do the story, we're going to record you and you're going to have your eyes closed. Now, of course, you're not going to have your eyes closed in trial, but kind of like training wheels for your mind, because that way, people react to what they're saying and it can throw them off, right? It can start affecting their ability, especially if there's other people there, their ability to present. And I always start out with the story of happiness, and because people want to relive stories of happiness. So they need to know what it's like to transport. So the story, like I always use it like the trainings, and oftentimes the clients is, teaching your son or daughter how to ride a bicycle, right? Because it's an individual moment. It's not like graduating from college, but there's the moment when you let go of the bike and the kid's like, all giddy, and it's a universally relatable story, right? I mean, even thinking about it, there's the train you talked about.
Yeah.
Is that the train?
That's the train. Yeah.
See, Andrew's got so much going on in Florida. His house is right next to a train, so he gets a little ambiance every so often.
It's funny, as you were mentioning the story about the bike, my mind went right to teaching my 9-year-old Reef how to ride a bike just a few years ago. And that really is a happy moment. And I could put myself in that place.
Oh yeah. No, it's just because it's a universally relatable story. Everybody's learned to ride a bike and everybody's had their, parent typically, or maybe mine was my older sister, because, I was the youngest of 8. So my parents were busy working. Didn't have time to teach me how to ride a bike. They delegated that. But because but by doing that one, that's a story people want to relive, and the story has to take place that they relive prior to the injury, because everything after the injury is affected by the injury, right?
Right.
And it's also typically a good before and after story. And so, so we start out with that story, and start the story process, I was like, Andrew. So if you were the witness, Andrew, I say, Andrew, where are you at when you teach your son Reef how to ride a bike? Where are you and Reef at?
We're in just a wide open parking lot.
Okay, and what time of year is it?
I'm thinking it's the fall, if I remember correctly.
What's the weather like in Florida that
Um,
day?
I mean, still kind of hot, but tolerable. You're not sweating, so there might be a breeze.
And what time of day is it?
This is in the afternoon, maybe like 5:30 or so.
5:30. And is it clear? What's the weather like?
Yeah, it's clear. Typical Florida day without a thunderstorm.
Is anybody else there with you?
No, it's just the two of us.
And what color is Reese's bike?
Yeah, I should correct you. It's reef, like coral reef.
Oh, sorry, Reef, not like Reese Cup. Reef's bike.
Yeah, I think at the time he had a blue bike.
And
Uh,
what kind of what color seat is it?
black
Is
seat.
it a regular seat or like a banana seat?
Just regular seat.
Okay. So, so those are the questions that, because I got to be able to visualize it, like you said,
Right.
be the director. And by asking all those questions, you notice every one question I ask, because I'm trying to picture the story.
Right.
And my questions are always in the present tense. Even when the witness answers in the past tense, I'm always pushing them to picture it. But
Yeah.
every question, especially like what color is the bike, cause you to pause. I can see your eyes just, deflect into your mind's eye to look at the image in your mind and come back to retrieve the information. Right. And if I don't see that, then I know you're just guessing and trying to remember and not trying to picture it. Right. And by forcing you to give me the details, okay, what color is the seat on the bike? Then you have to go focus on the bike again. And so that forces the mind to transport. So I'm beginning you to teach you the transporting process. And if I see some warmth on your face, I know it's going well.
Right.
Because if you think about your 4 or 5-year-old son, Reef, and he's sitting there right in front of you and you're not smiling, well, then you're a sociopath, sir. We got bigger problems than witness prep. But and so then after I got this preliminary information, that's when I have the person close their eyes. And then I say, Andrew, everything we've experienced in our lives is stored in our minds in pictures and images. So when you tell your story, first see the picture or image. And when you can see the image, step into the image and imagine that you're there. Imagine that you're no longer here in this conference room, but you're back there. You're back there with Reef in that parking lot. And you can, feel the sun on your skin and you can feel the breeze on your face and hear Reef's voice. And I said, none of us are here either. We're all back there with you, about 10 feet behind you, but you can't see us. And I'm not here. I'm just a voice guiding you. So, Andrew, when you can really be there and you can really be there with your son, Reef, then you can begin your story. And so as you begin the story, there's things that I'm looking for to see if you are remembering or whether you're transporting. And so the things are like your emotional state. Like if you talk about your son and your face doesn't light up at all, well, that tells me you're just remembering,
Right.
right? If you speak in the past tense, I never tell people to speak in the present tense because then if they do, they speak in the present tense, but they're not picturing stuff. They're still telling a flat story. If you describe an emotion, if you're like, I'm really happy right now, he's really excited. Because the only time we ever describe emotions is when we're not feeling them. That's why the worst question in the world is, how did that make you feel? Because we should all know how the person feels at any moment if they're feeling it. And if they're not feeling it, describing the feeling is not going to help at all. And then, if there's a verb, whenever there's a verb, if there's no hand movement, if you're like, my son's riding his bike and your hand's not moving, then I know you're remembering it, right? And so these are the things that I'm looking for to say, is this witness transported or are they just remembering? Now, most people, it's not the easiest thing for them, right? Because they feel pressure. There's a camera there. Obviously, they're in their head. And so I constantly monitor these things to see if they're there or not. And if I don't think they are, then I'll say, freeze time, Andrew. Wherever you're at, freeze time. So I wait till it's like, it'd be in the parking lot. Okay. And I said, I want you to, wherever you're standing, where you're standing right now is your free time. You tell me. And I said, I want you to look around from your left to your right and show us what you see, just like you showed us this room. And then it forces you, okay, over here is a car, blah, 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 blah. Now you're forced to visualize it again, focus your mind there. And, because it's really about focusing the mind. And then I'll see if that helps. But then the next instruction will be as soon as there's a piece of dialogue or somebody says something, right? Like your son, if he says something, oh, dad, da, da, da. So I'll listen to your voice as you say it. Because when people are transported, we can hear people, we can hear that person's voice in there. But whenever they talk about their characters, they become those characters unconsciously. The unconscious mind does this. Because this process, you ever hear this guy, Dave Clark, that I mentioned earlier?
I've heard of him. I think I've heard John Barry talk about him because he's from Nebraska, right?
Yes. Oh, Barry's part of your fireproof operation?
Well, I met John Barry at the Trial Lawyers College. He was in my class.
Oh my gosh. That's
And
crazy.
we've become really close. John's a great guy.
TLU Huntington Beach is going to be the greatest event of 2026. There's going to be 4 lecture tracks, 8 workshop tracks with the top trial lawyers in the country. On Tuesday, June 2nd, there's going to be a golf outing, pickleball outing. That night, we're going to have a dinner at the La Rea. We're going to buy it out. Everybody gets a chance to meet each other beforehand. And then during the conference, of course, we do a full breakfast, full lunch, and theme parties every night. This year, we're going to be utilizing the pool area and the restaurant for more of the parties. And we're going to have an adult swim right one night, a Satch Oliver party on Friday night. And the last theme party is going to be a 80s Run DMC Adidas jumpsuit. It's going to be the greatest. And last year we had over 800 people. This year it's going to be over 1,000. So if you want to be part of it all and you want to stay at the Paseo Hotel, don't delay because it sells out fast and then you're going to be in the overflow. Can't wait to see you there. TLU Beach. Yeah, I did a workshop for his law firm a few years ago out in Omaha through Clark. But anyways, Clark, when I first started training with Clark, he said, Dan, this is all about making the unconscious conscious. Because when you can make the unconscious conscious, you got to be fucking dangerous. In the civil world, we call that rich. And I'm like, I want to be rich. Because I was a very, very lower middle class criminal defense public defender at the time. So he was manipulating me. Thank God he manipulated me into motivating me to try to learn how to do things and make money. And so then when I give the dialogue instruction, I said, Andrew, whenever somebody speaks in our stories, we have to pause. I said, pause. I said, hear that person's voice in your head, and that's the voice you must use. However they said it then, you must say it now. You must imagine that you are them. We can see your face in their face and hear their voice in your voice. Then you can tell us what they say. And the exact words are not important as long as they're congruent with your memories. And obviously this is, people say, oh, that's role reversal. I would say it is role reversal. I mean, obviously, but it's very instructed role reversal. It's not just say reverse roles. It's like, I want you to do these things as you do the voice. And, but it gets to the same point. I just like my way of doing it because it tells people how to get there. It tells people the path. Because that was often my frustration with the Trial Lawyers College. I'm like, how do I apply this stuff? I understand. I see how you do it and you're great. I want to be like you, but I don't know how to apply it. And they were like, oh, you have to figure it out. And I'm like, I ain't that fucking bright. I mean, I ain't figuring shit out. I couldn't figure it out. You figured it out. And so, because I couldn't figure it out, I had to figure it out my own way. And, then I record the person as they tell their story and then play it back for them so that they can see. And because people are smart, people are like, oftentimes people are like, oh, my clients are so dumb, they could never figure this shit out. I'm like, they're a lot smarter than you think they are. Plus, they're human beings and they have, this process is, uniformly works. And so I play them back the recording, show them when they're transporting, show them when they're not. And then we move right into the story of what happened, the crash, whatever. And I said, give me the details, where it happened, where you're at, who's there, blah, blah, blah. And next thing you know, before they don't even have to close their eyes anymore. And now they're just transporting their story and they tell the whole thing, you know what I mean? It's like, and then they're like, when do you want me to close my eyes? I'm like, you know what? You don't have to close your eyes. You're a transporter. They're like, yes, I'm a transporter. And because then that story will work into the direct examination, right? Because it's one thing to get a 10-minute flowing narrative. It's one thing to get a psychodrama and all the information that takes, I did a lot of psychodrama, obviously in 12 years. I did
Right.
my share, more than my share,
Yeah, I bet.
more than my share of conversations with my father,
Yeah.
who also was passed away, which was, and it was, honestly, that part was therapeutic, a few days of it. But, I like to limit psychodrama to a few days. And because actually it's not very fun to do. It's excruciatingly miserable to do, frankly. That's, I didn't, and so, but like to turn it into a direct examination. So I'd say, Andrew, now we got the story out, but we have to do it in a question and answer format because, facts of a case are sort of like me and pizza. I love pizza, but if I shovel a slice in my mouth at once, I'm going to choke on it, right? The jury wants the information, but we got to give it to them in bite-sized chunks. Otherwise, they won't remember it, okay? I said, so to do this, it's just 4 simple rules. Rule number 1. Whenever you're asked a question, make sure you understand the question, okay? Then ask yourself, what image must I access in order to answer the question? Then, while accessing the image, answer the question. When you're done, close the image up, come back to me, and I'll know you're ready for the next question. And if you do this, you'll be impenetrable to cross-examination because that's what everybody wants, right? That's what everybody's afraid of. And I say, and I pick my phone up. I said, for example, if I said, Andrew, my phone is purple, right? What would you say?
No.
It's purple, right? Just look at it.
No, it's black.
Exactly. And notice your demeanor. You're not being defensive. You're talking to me like I'm confused.
Right.
Either I'm colorblind or I don't understand the meanings of words purple versus black. Either way, I'm not a bad guy. And that defense lawyer, he's not a bad guy either. He's just confused and we're going to unconfuse him. Okay? And the witness is like, yeah, let's unconfuse him. So that is how I teach and coach. And obviously it's a process. You have to practice but to get people to transport, that's what psychodrama is trying to do is get them to transport, get them to relive the event. I just, I consider mine to be short-circuited psychodrama, right? Get the role reversal, get there, set the scene, all the stuff we're talking about, but with just 2 of us, because, that way, because it was like a lot of work, you know what I mean? Not everybody can bring in trainer, mic trainer to be the director or has 3 days to, to do the stuff. I mean,
Sure.
and that's what it takes there to do that. So this was my truncated version of it. So for what it's worth, anyways, I think it works pretty well. And, as much as I've done in the last 5 years, so many people tell me that we're part of the Trojan horse days. They're like, Dan, I like all your shit you done, but I gotta tell you that the thing that you did the most, that helped me the most get more results, making more money, because at the end of the day, not to be completely crass, but that's what it's about. Better results, making more money is like the witness prep and the direct has been the biggest game changer. So I'm like, it's nice to hear. I guess I didn't have to do all the other stuff to be memorable to you. So thank you very much. No, it's critical. It's critical, the witness prep. And I like when I help, sometimes I go to law firms and do like 1-day programs, but I spend a lot of time on that because for like young lawyers, because a young lawyer needs to contribute to their firm, right? You hire a new lawyer, especially one out of law school, that person is a financial negative for a long time. All the time you spend coaching them, all the mistakes they make. And then, the worst thing is they finally figure out what the fuck they're doing. And they think oh my God, I'm a rock star now. I need to have my salary tripled. You're like, I've been losing money for the last year on you. And you're like, yeah, but now I know what I'm doing. So the fact that you got 3 people working for you that are lawyers, good for you. Cause it's not easy, these lawyers, coaching them all.
Yeah, I'm really blessed to have a great team. In fact, I have an entirely female team. So everybody who works with me in the office is female, which was not necessarily by design, but I think it's been really beneficial to have that perspective. And I think I benefited tremendously from having that energy in my office.
Well, you know what? It's your little empire there in Melbourne, Florida. You get to build it however you want.
That's right. It's only going to get better.
And so the trial lawyers college helped you a lot there, but also how, as far as being a better presenter, because I understand all the psychodrama stuff pretty well, but because like I think being a great presenter is about transporting, right? Is about transporting the audience into the story to make them witnesses. And, when I train presentation, I try to break, I think it's a complex skill And any complex skill you want to learn, you have to break it down into smaller parts. Because presentation, I really think, because what I gleaned after 12 years at the ranch was that it's about connection. That's the goal. The goal is to be connected to your client and connected to the jury. We can all agree on that.
Yeah.
And, and so it's a path to get there.
Yeah. I mean, as far as presentation, I think that what has benefited me is a lot of different kind of venues where I've had the opportunity to practice. So I think being a prosecutor and those first 4 years where I was in the courtroom every single day and having to respond to things on the fly and learning how to think on my feet, and then, trying over 40 cases in 4 years, like just getting those reps in, I think gave me a lot of confidence. What I also did early on, and I have continued to do until today, which was never intended to help me be a trial lawyer, but what has done so incidentally, is I actually teach a class to the police academy. So new recruits who are trying to become police officers, I teach them basic criminal law, and I'll do that 1 or 2 days once a quarter. And that's like a 4 or 5 hours at a time teaching, and just being in that room and trying to keep the engagement of like 40 or 50 people. And the amount of times that I've done that, I've probably done that 50 or 60 times over the past 10 or 12 years. That's been really helpful. And there's kind of a parallel there, in addition to the Trial Lawyers College, I've also been influenced tremendously by Mark Lanier. And I think I've seen you at some of his conferences. I've been to his trial academy probably 8 or 9 times. And I heard him speak at an event in, I want to say 2015, and was just really impressed. And so I started going to his seminar. And as you know, at that seminar, he's standing up there speaking for 8 hours straight and just captivating everybody the entire time. And what I learned about him is that, he's also a pastor, and he teaches a Sunday school class every Sunday. And so during that, where he's teaching his Sunday school class, he's doing his whole elaborate PowerPoint presentation, and he's putting in prep to that. So he's just getting in those reps to become a better presenter. And although that wasn't my design with teaching at the police academy, I think that's been kind of an incidental benefit. Another thing that I've done to help with presentation is taking improv classes. I'm not doing it currently, but I was doing it before, and I want to get back into it. And that's really helped me to be able to think on my feet and like respond in real time, and kind of be in the moment. So those have all kind of contributed. I think that as a prosecutor, all of my criminal cases we had digital recordings of. So I could literally watch myself in trial and notice a lot of the tendencies that I had to say, for example, okay after every single question, or
Right.
the ums and the r's. So those are some things that I've tried to iron out over time. And then as the leader of my firm, we have regular meetings where I'm speaking to the entire group. And I really try to, like you said, set intention going into those meetings and think about that as a performance. So just a couple weeks ago, we had our quarterly meeting where we have what's called the state of the firm. And so I was speaking in front of 15 people at my firm for about 2 or 3 hours. And I had a presentation, and just getting those reps in whenever I can.
I could not agree with you more. Because I just did a boot camp in Cabo for about 25 folks who'd been to my boot camps before. And the goal was to help them so that when they get back to wherever they came from, to start their own little training groups, because the greatest benefit of being a teacher is being the teacher.
Right.
It's like I asked this guy who was a Cirque du Soleil performer at a Thanksgiving dinner a couple years ago. I was at my friend's house in Vegas, and I'm like, and the guy's talking about he's got all these broken bones, and he's 45 years old, and he's got pain and this, and now he does something where he's probably making 3 times as much money. And I'm like, why? I said, what was the greatest thing about being a performer? I don't get it. You know what I mean? Because like, of course, I'm just suffering, like that. And the guy looks at me, he's like, performing.
Yeah.
And that's the greatest thing about, the greatest thing about being a teacher is being the teacher, is getting to be in a position to change other people's lives, but also those reps up in front of people.
Yeah.
When you're teaching, when you're up there in front of 5 or 6 people, a small group, but you're teaching them, explaining complex concepts, but you have to constantly be reading their faces
Yeah.
and making sure that they are following you, that
Right.
they are with you. That is, and the more that I've seen so many people transition from teachers, especially at the trial lawyers college, like, the Joey Lowe's and the Rex Paris's,
Yeah.
who were nobody when they, you know what I mean? But all those, reps up there in front of people and you said having to command the audience. And that's why like speaking at conferences, I think is so great for
Right.
the trial lawyering skills.
You
Because
know, mentioning Rex Paris, he's been the mayor of Lancaster since like 2008. So imagine all of the opportunities that he has to speak in front of people. It's just amazing.
oh yeah. No, it's like, I mean, that's why I'm myself very personally very excited to get back to the courtroom because since I've been there, I've learned a lot
Right.
by, all those case analysis and
Yeah, I
all
bet.
of the, interviews that I've done with, folks like you and cases I've worked on as a consultant, but now I got to get back in the game because like I look in the mirror and I see a rock star that should be making, ripping down 8-figure verdicts and 9-figure verdicts routinely, Pickett, and that's not quite the reality right now. And so there's a little separation between the guy I'm seeing in the mirror and the guy who's actually sitting in the, living every life. So we got to grow into that.
Well,
And
you're
just
you're
bring,
you're you're doing a great thing with the TLU, and I'm sure that you're learning a ton. I mean, I can't imagine how you wouldn't just being around all these awesome people. And one of the things that I love the most about the trial lawyers and the plaintiff lawyers community is just kind of this collective sense of everybody wanting to bring each other up. And I think that there is an emerging trend, especially among younger lawyers, of wanting to share information and being transparent with how they do things so they can make other people better. I think there has been kind of historically, I think among the older generation, kind of an idea that you need to guard your secrets and not share things. But I think that that comes from a place of scarcity as opposed to abundance. And I think for me in my own personal growth, having an abundance mindset has really served me personally and professionally. And when I see other lawyers in the trial lawyers community sharing information and getting excited about other people's victories, I think that really inspires me. And on like on this case that I had, the wrongful death trial, I mentioned that I consulted with Sean Claggett and Jordan Logan, and they were every bit as excited as I was about the trial and getting ready and the verdict and everything. And it was just cool to see that people have the capacity to celebrate the wins of others. And so instead of looking at somebody else getting a huge verdict and being jealous of it, I think that the way to approach it is to be happy because the bigger verdicts people get around the country, the more it helps everybody. And we have compared to the defense bar, I think we just do an incredible job of sharing information. And I think that your programs, especially starting during COVID where you had all the webinars, I think it just opened up a huge kind of access to information funnel that allowed so many people to learn stuff that they never would have. I think this might have been, I don't know if it was one of your webinars early on during COVID, but somebody had a demonstrative aid of an iceberg, and it was to demonstrate the difference between economic and non-economic damages. So it was like the 10% that you could see above the water was the economic damages, and the 90% below was the non-economic. And I've used that in several trials. And I imagine there are a lot of other people around the country who have really taken stuff from the TLU webinars and implemented them. So I think it's a great service that you're providing. And I hope I can see a lot of people come to TLU Huntington Beach to learn because I know that I've gotten a lot out of it. And I think that if we continue as a community to adopt this mindset of abundance and sharing, it's only going to benefit everybody as opposed to thinking about it in terms of like hoarding information and, kind of living in these silos. Because I think as we can see, the large verdicts that have exploded, especially post COVID, have really benefited all of us. So that's something that I really am excited about as a trial lawyer is kind of being part of that community and being part of the emerging trend to be more sharing and abundant.
be sure to join us in Winter Park, Colorado, March 14th through 21st. We're going to be doing a ski and trial skills boot camp. So we'll be skiing every day, but in the morning And in the evenings, we'll be working on your trial skills. That means witness prep and direct examination, cross-examination, presentation skills, which are opening statement and closing argument, and of course, jury selection. And remember that your entire tuition will be donated to the fight against Uber in California, because they're trying to destroy our civil justice system. And they're starting with California, but if they win here, your state may be next. So join the fight and come to Winter Park. Yeah, I think that the COVID thing really helped out a lot.
Yeah.
Because everybody was stuck at home, and from just, again, from pure selfishness, the need to be relevant, force people. And as some people shared more, other people listened. I got to share more. I got to keep up.
Right.
This guy's giving the goods. If I don't give the goods, I'm a fraud. And it's true. Like, if you get up, speak on the stage, and you don't share the goods, you are a fraud, because all you're saying is, I'm great. I'm not going to teach you how to be great. Just bring me your case. And
That's exactly right. And I think that that is the kind of conditioning of a lot of the older generation, is that, older lawyers who are successful will show up to CLEs and just tell everybody how hard it is, for example, to try a trucking case. This is so difficult, and there's no way that you could do it, so you should refer the case to me. And I think that that mindset is dissolving over time, and I think that this younger generation is really helping with that. And I think that the access to information and the sharing through online platforms is helping tremendously. And it's a good thing for the profession.
hell yeah. Oh, and anybody that doesn't have TLU on demand, by the way, because everything we've done for the last 5 years, that wants to try it out, just shoot me an email. I'll send you a comp code so you can try it out, because it's also an app for your phone. And we've collected all the pleadings, transcripts, and PowerPoints for all these cases. And all 5 years of live conferences have been recorded too, plus close to, I think we're approaching 500 webinars.
Wow.
Oh, also, the boot camps we do this year, Mr. Pickett, this lovely company called Uber is trying to destroy our civil justice system. And that's what I was at a little fundraiser for it last night with Bob Simon and Brian Panish and Nick Rowley. And so this year too, people that do come to the boot camps, the tuition will be given to the CAOC, Consumers Attorneys of California, to help fight this. So we're doing a program at Nick Rowley's place coming up here in Big Sky. So it's a smaller program, but we did manage to raise, I think, around $40,000 for the cause. So that's
Great.
$40,000 from people around the country that wouldn't have had it. And we got a lot more coming up throughout the year with great people like Eric Oliver, Rahul Ravapudi, David D. Robertus, unemployment, Joe Freed's doing a trucking one, Satch Albert, the depositions are trial. So, if we can find those dates out on our, website. So I'm real excited about that, because you get to work on your case, meet a whole bunch of cool people that are like-minded, that are equally dedicated. That was a great thing about going to the ranch, right? Anybody that come out there for 3 weeks,
Oh yeah.
takes a special kind of person, right? It's like,
It sure does.
I just did this conference in Alaska like a week ago.
Oh, cool.
And anybody that would travel to Alaska in January when it's 10 below zero and it's only light for like 5 hours a day, I went into we did it private in the courthouse. So I was outside at 8:30 in the morning, because I did a public defender program besides doing a one for the civil lawyers. So I
Wow.
go in at 8:30, it's dark. I come out at 4 o'clock, dark. It was crazy, and freezing. I was like, who lives up here full time? I mean, these people are nuts. And their fucking justice system is, they got caps like
Yeah.
they're like Alaska. So it's, but it does take a special kind of person to go to Alaska. And
Yeah.
so it makes it, it was pretty cool there. And the sharing is the important part there. So I got 2 questions here for you, Mr. Andrew Pickett, to finish things up. Oh, I think I did 2 questions for you. Yep. First one is, what do you think the greatest quality skills, like if somebody come to you and said, Andrew, I want to be a trial lawyer, what would you say to that person? How to get there? I need some advice. Looks like you figured out a lot of stuff. And so I don't want to have to take 15 years to get to where you got. I want to do it in 3. So give me the goods.
Well, I think what comes to mind immediately is having humility. And what I mean by that is having the humility to understand how much there is to learn. And I think if you take the approach of knowing it all, you're going to be resistant to feedback. You're going to be resistant to understanding what your blind spots are. And so I think that, like, the humility and this kind of beginner's mind is something that really would benefit anybody. And so if you're really trying to accelerate your growth, there are just so many resources out there to learn from and to figure out how to kind of make something your own. And so I think having that humility and the willingness to experiment, the willingness to fail and to get constructive feedback from other people, and understand throughout that process that you ultimately have to figure out what works best for you. And as you're learning different approaches, understand also that there really shouldn't be any sort of dogma about there's one way of doing things. I think you have to figure out what works for your own personality, what you're comfortable with, while kind of taking pieces from different approaches that work best for you. So that would be my advice.
Solid advice. Stay curious. Okay. And the final, how long you been practicing now?
So about almost 17 years.
17 years. So let's say we can rewind the clock. 17 years ago, we have a time machine. We step into it. We spin the earth back on its axis to 17 years ago, and you just got your bar card. And so what advice, what words of wisdom would you give to the bright-eyed chair? I bet your face was really smiling when you passed that bar. I know mine was. And so what advice would you give to young Andrew Pickett, who's just starting out in this world and got to find his way to becoming the person he's supposed to be?
So it's kind of hard, like, because as I'm thinking about this, part of me is thinking I really wouldn't have done anything differently because everything that I have done up to this point has led to where I am now. And had some challenge not happened early on, I wouldn't have gone down a certain road. Tony Robbins says, life happens for you, not to you. So I think that when you look back at different things that have happened, it makes sense looking back and how one thing led to another. One piece of advice that I got, and it wasn't directly, I actually think it was through some sort of seminar, but it was Rick Friedman who said that trial lawyers would really benefit, or like all trial lawyers should go through some sort of therapy. And I think that's really good advice and understanding yourself. And I've only done that recently, but I would probably have advised myself 17 years ago to start therapy sooner, to try to understand myself and to try to connect more with life experiences that have shaped who I am. But I don't think I would really do anything differently. There's another quote that Steve Jobs has where he says, like, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking back. So you have to trust that the dots in your life will somehow connect in your future. And you just have to trust, whatever it is that you believe in, whether it's, trusting yourself, trusting the universe, trusting God, just trusting that it's all going to work out. And as long as you are open to opportunity and kind of have your antenna open for the next opportunity that comes up and walking through that door and seeing where it leads, I think that's all you can do, because you can't plan out exactly how your career is going to progress or where you're going to go. But I think if you stay open to opportunity and you take risks, you're going to get to where you need to get. And you're going to be able to figure out when you look back how it is that you got there. So I don't think I would change a thing, but I do think that for younger lawyers, I wish I would have heard that advice before from Rick Friedman about starting therapy, because I think that there really is a fundamental reason why a lot of us become trial lawyers, whether we know it or not. And, a story that I hear a lot is that people either were bullied themselves or witnessed bullying and have a strong sense of justice or righteousness for standing up for the underdog. And so, in understanding what really makes me tick and looking back in my past, I've always been somebody who really doesn't appreciate when people are being bullied. And our clients, as you know, tend to be bullied a lot, whether it's, in the criminal justice system or by insurance companies. And so I think that understanding that why is something that would have only come from doing therapy and working on myself through personal development in different arenas. So that's my best answer.
All right. That's yep, that bullying thing. I can relate to that. I was
Yeah.
bullied quite a bit in high school. And I was like really overweight as a kid, so I got picked on a lot.
Yeah.
That was not fun at all. She'd be like, yeah,
Yeah.
it made you strong. I'm like, I don't want to be that strong. Okay. No kid wants to be that strong. It sucks getting picked on and
Yeah.
being bullied. So I can relate to that. And I can see, so most trial lawyers getting this, be bullied, a little fucked up, need a little therapy.
Yeah.
I can give lots of credit to my 12, lots of therapy. The 12, one thing I for sure got from the trial lawyers college was a lot of therapy. Didn't
Yeah.
make a lot of friends though. And, for me, it was great because it was, without going through that, then I would have never been able to define what
That's
I
right.
thought it should be. Right. And so,
Yeah, that's how you can connect the dots looking backwards.
right.
Yeah.
No, like there's nothing more than I wanted when I was there to be accepted to be an instructor at the trial lawyers college. Like it meant everything to me to be accepted. And the constant rejection year after year was, obviously wasn't enjoyable. Like I'm like, I see all these people getting on staff that were like my classmates, and I'm like, what's wrong with me? But I'm so grateful because had I, had that happen, it's very unlikely I'd be sitting here today, right? Because I would have never had to, forge my own way and, explain my own philosophy on all this stuff
Right.
called trial lawyering and teaching and see if anybody connects with what I'm saying. And so just journey. It's not a straight line. And, I know what you say, I mean by like not change a thing. Cause like I've been through quite a few, let's say, I don't know what kind of challenges to get to where I'm at today, but I'm very happy about, today, life, what I get to do, the people I get to serve, get to hang out. And now I want to become a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
Or get back to being a trial lawyer, but a civil one. Because I tried like you, I did a lot of trials as a criminal defense guy. I think if I calculated them over 17 years, it was around 175
Wow.
because I was constantly in trial because I had a really abrasive attitude back then. Like I'm really easy to get along with now, but like I see a prosecutor, I'd be like, no deals. I'm like, good. Fuck you. I don't want your fucking deal. I want a fucking trial. Okay. And this is like a DUI case with a .15 BAC. Like, no deals. Your guy has one from 15 years ago. I'm like, good. Set this for a hearing. Evidentiary hearing. They go, what are you contesting? I'm like, the stop. They're like, the guy was speeding. I'm like, so says your cop. Let's see him say it under oath. Of course, it was just a chance to get my deposition in. So I get the guy on the record. So I have something to impeach him with. But hey, got to have those evidentiary hearings. Got to get those reps in, right?
That's right.
Get that practice in. And so anyways, it was all a good time back there in those criminal days and learning the way and forging our way and,
Yeah.
getting to live our best life. And you got a lot to balance. I mean, I'm always impressed with people that have a family, a wife and kids. And,
Yeah, that has been such a life-changing experience for me in such a good way. I think you might have met my wife. So my wife, Keely, she's a lawyer as well. And we actually met doing a psychodrama, which was really funny. She worked for a friend of mine who'd been through the college. But I think having the life experiences of having grief, people close to you dying, but also having the perspective of, being married, having a son. Those things I think really just they give you more depth to be able to relate to your clients and to the jury. So I think it all kind of connects together.
it's all connected.
Yeah.
It's all connected. All right, Mr. Pickett, good chatting with you. I look
You
forward
as
to
well.
seeing you in just a couple days in Miami.
That's right. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. And I'm so honored to be able to speak at TLU and look forward to seeing everybody there too.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
The greatest one ever. I'm starting off we got a golf tournament the day before. Ted Wacker's hosting that. And then my buddy Faraj from Finch Legal, he's hosting a dinner party on Tuesday night, buying out the restaurant. So everybody that's there on Tuesday will all get super connected. Even before the conference starts, right? Because there's
Right.
nothing like sitting down with a group of people, like even a couple hundred of them,
Yeah.
and breaking bread to start things off. And so it's gonna start great. And then at the end on Sunday morning, because I like everybody to hang out, my buddy Scott Frost is hosting a brunch for everybody that wants to be there on Sunday morning. So
Cool.
we start out with a dinner party and with brunch and we're gonna have, because remember, it gets kind of cold there at night, right?
Right.
From my little socials. But now they're going to be indoor, outdoor because we rent out the restaurant and the tree house. Oh, I'm getting better at this. Thing. It's
Yeah.
my 5th year in a row. I'm dialing it in, Pickett. Because
Getting
now
better
I'm
every
getting
year.
ready. Because when Pickett's coming to the stage, I'm like, you better, you called me up and said, Ambrose, only come if you bring your A game for a year. If I said, I'm gonna fucking work on it, Andrew. Don't you worry. Look at these eyes. Focus. All right. I'll see you later.
All right, good to see you.
Ready to train with the Titans and set records with your verdicts? Register for our live conferences and boot camps at triallawyersuniversity.com. Start getting your reps in before the big event by going to tluondemand.com to gain instant access to live lectures, case analysis, and skills training videos from the trial lawyer champions you love and respect, as well as pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints, and notes for a roadmap to victory. Join the group that continues to get extraordinary results. Trial Lawyers University, produced and powered by LawPods.